Have you ever found yourself looking through old newspaper clippings, maybe a yellow telegram, or even like a military document from way back?
Oh, definitely. There's something really tangible about them.
Yeah, there's a real power in those fragments, isn't there?
Mm.
Each one feels like a tiny window, not just into a moment, but into a whole life, a story, often, set against these huge historical events.
It's quite remarkable, actually. Individually, they might seem like just pieces of paper, right? But when you carefully gather them up, start connecting the dots, they can weave together this really personal picture. Reveals so much more than just the bare facts.
That's exactly what we're trying to do today on the deep dive. We're taking a journey through a really fascinating stack of sources, mostly local newspaper reports from a small Kansas town, Seneca,
Mm-hmm.
and alongside those, one incredibly significant German military document. Our aim is to piece together the life and, well, the ultimate fate of one young man during World War II, Raymond Woltkamp.
What's so compelling here, I think, is how these fragments, which seem quite different at first glance, let us not just learn about the past, but really witness a family's hope as it changes. Their agony of not knowing, and then finally their grief. It gives you this unique, really close-up look at the human side of war. It makes you think, what did it actually mean to be missing in action? And how did families even cope with that kind of profound uncertainty?
So let's unpack this story. It really starts back in the spring of 1941 in Seneca, Kansas.
Oh.
Picture Raymond Woltkamp, just a young guy, about to start this journey that ties his personal fate to a massive global conflict. He enlists in the Army Air Corps.
And his path, his training, it happened incredibly fast.
Right.
The newspaper reports really track his progress almost blow by blow. By December 42, so not much more than a year later, he'd already done 60 hours of primary flying.
Wow.
Then he moved on to basic training at Perrin Field in Sherman, Texas. He was part of Class 43D Cadet Detachment. That designation itself tells you something about how fast they were pushing pilot training then.
Yeah, scaling up massively. And the pace didn't slow down. Just 2 months later, February 43, he's finished basic, and he's off to twin-engine school in Lubbock, Texas.
Which was a critical step, obviously, getting him closer to piloting the bigger multi-engine planes that he'd end up flying in combat.
And the milestones just kept coming. April 1943, that's a big one. He graduates, gets his wings, and he's commissioned as a lieutenant, specifically a second lieutenant.
For a young man, that's just an incredibly quick rise through the ranks. It really underscores the urgency of the war effort, They needed pilots desperately.
After all that intense training, there was a brief moment back home. September 16, 1943. There's a report of him visiting his parents in Seneca, Mr. and Mrs. Tony Woltkamp. Before that, he'd been stationed down in Clovis, New Mexico. Stud craning, I imagine.
Mm-hmm. Honing his skills. And his next assignment was, well, it points directly to the dangerous role he was heading towards. He was sent to Bruning Airport near Fairbury, Nebraska, for more specific training as a pilot of a B-24 Liberator bomber.
Oh, the Liberator.
Exactly. A formidable long-range aircraft, absolutely essential to the Allied bombing campaigns over Europe.
And it wasn't just Raymond serving. During that short leave back home, the reports mentioned he was hoping to catch up with his brother Clarence.
Right. Clarence was with the Seabees.
Yeah, also on leave, apparently. It just paints this vivid picture, doesn't it? A family deeply involved, but also scattered geographically by the war effort.
It really brings home that wider context. The Woltkamp family story, it's like a microcosm of so many American families back then. Multiple sons serving, different branches, different theaters, all facing danger.
Speaking of heading overseas, Raymond's departure date is reported as November 28, 1943. Though, interestingly, another source mentions November 29th.
A slight discrepancy, yeah. Happens with these old records sometimes.
Either way, late November 33, he leaves the U.S.
And then good news arrives just before Christmas. December 20th, 1943, word reaches his parents. Flight Officer Raymond Woltkamp had arrived safely in Africa.
That must have been a huge relief for them, just knowing he made the journey okay.
Absolutely. Crossing the Atlantic back then, even without direct combat, had its own risks.
What makes this next detail quite poignant is a small personal touch we found. He apparently named his Liberator bomber the Guardian Angel.
Guardian Angel.
Yeah. When you think about what eventually happened, what do you make of that name?
It really speaks volumes, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
It suggests this mix of hope, maybe a bit of, superstition, a plea for protection, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
So many air crews named their planes. These names often had deep personal meaning, maybe a connection to home, or just a quiet nod to the incredible risks they were taking every single day. It shows that human element, even amidst all the machinery of war.
And again, it wasn't just Raymond's personal journey. The Woltkamp family, like so many others, was fully committed. Besides Raymond, his brother, First Squeak Anthony Woltkamp, was training stateside Tennessee, Kentucky, then eventually got shipped to England with a tank destroyer group. And Clarence, the brother Raymond hoped to see, he was serving way out in the Pacific with the Seabees, first near Camp Peary in Virginia, then later in Hawaii. Their family story really is a powerful example of that national sacrifice.
It's a stark reminder. Almost every family had someone serving, often in multiple places across the globe.
Okay, so the story takes a really dramatic turn here. The date is January 16, 1944. That's the day of the mission over Italy when Lt. Raymond Woltkamp was reported missing in action after an air battle.
You can almost feel the shockwave in the local papers. He'd only been overseas, what, about 2 months?
Barely 2 months, yeah.
Barely enough time to really even settle into the operational rhythm before this devastating news hit home.
The official notification was just a stark telegram. His parents received it from Adjutant General Ulio. It basically said, if we get any more information, we'll let you know immediately.
That awful, open-ended uncertainty, just waiting. That defined the experience for countless families during the war. No closure, just silence.
The local papers, the Courier-Tribune and the Sabetha Herald, in February 44, they provided a little background on him. Mentioned he attended St. Peter and Paul School, graduated in 1940, and that he worked out west for a bit, specifically Klamath Falls, Oregon, before he enlisted. It really makes you think, how does a tight-knit community like Seneca grapple with news like that? Immediate, devastating, but also completely uncertain about one of their own sons.
And you can definitely feel that collective hope in the reports from that time. The community, his family, everyone was just clinging to that possibility that missing didn't automatically mean the worst had happened.
They were holding on to that thread.
And interestingly, there were some flickers of actual hope that emerged. On March 20, 1944, the Courier-Tribune reported what they called encouraging word received by Mr. and Mrs. Woltkamp.
This is where Mrs. Woltkamp's own efforts become really important. She was apparently writing to the families of the other crew members on Raymond's plane.
Proactive, yeah. Trying desperately to piece together what might have happened, sharing any scrap of information.
And the story that started to emerge from those exchanges must have felt like a lifeline. The word going around was that Raymond's plane had been forced down, yes, but over enemy-controlled water.
Okay.
And crucially, the crew had supposedly broadcast a distress signal before going down.
Ah, so a chance they were picked up.
Exactly. And the detail that really fueled this hope. The wife of the radio operator on the crew received official word from the government that her husband was alive and was a prisoner of war.
Wow, okay. That's significant.
Hugely significant. It led everyone to believe, quite logically, that the Germans must have rescued the entire crew.
And there was more, wasn't there? Another pilot.
Yeah, another pilot who was apparently in the same formation offered some corroborating detail. Suggested Raymond's plane seemed to have mechanical trouble and had to leave the group. It didn't necessarily contradict the rescue idea.
So you can just imagine the emotional impact of this period. Hearing from relatives of, 3 other crew members? That hope, that anticipation must have been immense for the Woltkamp family. Months of clinging to that possibility.
Months. It's almost unbearable to think about. And then after all that fragile hope, the final devastating news arrived. June 5, 1944.
The confirmation.
The confirmation. A telegram stating that Lt. Raymond Woltkamp, first pilot of a B-24 Liberator bomber, had, quote, died for his country January 16th of this year near Venice, Italy.
And the source of this confirmation is absolutely key here. The information came via Adjutant General Dunlop, yes, but critically, it originated from the German government, relayed through the International Red Cross. And this is where that specific German military document, one of our main sources today, becomes central to the story.
Let's talk about that document. It's from Luftflottenkommando 2. Basically, the German Air Fleet Command for that area of operations. It's dated February 5, 1944, and marked as received on February 10th.
So relatively soon after the event itself.
Yeah, and it states, quite unequivocally, that an American Liberator was shot down on January 16, 1944.
And the details are chillingly precise. It gives the location. Over Estino near S. Anastasio di Cisalto, province Treviso, gives the time. 1300 hours, so 1 p.m.
And then the direct confirmation about Raymond. It lists FO, Flight Officer Woltkamp R, gives his ID number, 121614 TA 342B, and states he was killed and, quote, found dead there.
Found dead there. Just stark. It also notes his burial place was unknown to them at that time.
That official notification must have just shattered everything. Nearly 6 months of silence, then hope fueled by news of other crew members being captured, all gone. Erased by this confirmation from the enemy itself. He was only 22, turned 22 the previous December.
It really underscores the brutal emotional whiplash of wartime communication, clinging to hope based on fragments, perhaps rumors circulating between families, only for it to be completely extinguished by a cold official report, often, yeah, from the very enemy forces.
So, with Raymond's death confirmed, the focus shifted to remembering him. He wasn't just a name on a casualty list. He was the kid who graduated from Saints Peter and Paul in 1940, the young man who had worked out in Oregon before enlisting back on April 11, 1941, in Portland.
The community remembered him well, described in the papers as a quiet young man, well-liked and admired by all who knew him. You can sense the deep sorrow and sympathy for his family in those reports.
He was survived by his parents, Mr. and Mrs. Tony Woltkamp. His 3 brothers were still serving. First, Sly and Anthony, by then in England with that tank destroyer group. Clarence, seaman first class with the Seabees in Hawaii. And Gary, the youngest, still at home.
And his sisters, too.
Right, 2 sisters. Mrs. Floyd Giles, who lived in Hamburg, Iowa, and Carolina, also still at home with Gary and their parents.
His life, his sacrifice, was publicly honored. A memorial Requiem High Mass was held on June 19, 1944, at Saints Peter and Paul Church back in Seneca. A gold star, the symbol of ultimate sacrifice, was placed on the service flag there. And local organizations, the Earl W. Taylor American Legion Post and the Fourth Degree Knights of Columbus, were involved in the services. It was clearly a community coming together to grieve and to honor him.
This whole deep dive, it really has been quite a journey, hasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Following the story from, the initial excitement of him earning his wings through that awful, gut-wrenching uncertainty of being missing in action.
Yeah.
And then finally the heartbreaking confirmation of his death via that German report.
What's truly fascinating, I think, is how these different kinds of sources, small-town newspaper clippings, filled with community updates and family hopes and fears.
Right.
And then this formal, almost bureaucratic enemy military document detailing the cold facts of a plane being shot down, how they actually converge. They come together to paint such a full and deeply human picture of one person's experience, one family sacrifice during this huge global conflict.
Absolutely. It's more than just a historical account, isn't it? It lets us, and you, the listener, almost experience that unfolding narrative of how wartime communication worked, or sometimes didn't work, and the profound impact it had, often with agonizing delays, on the families waiting back home. The way news traveled, the hopes it could ignite, sometimes falsely, and the crushing reality it eventually delivered.
Which really brings us to a final thought, something for you to consider. How much of history, especially these incredibly personal stories tucked inside massive conflicts like World War II, how much of it relies completely on somebody, somewhere, carefully preserving these diverse, sometimes random-seeming documents?
Yeah, finding them later.
And then someone else eventually discovering them, connecting the dots. You have to wonder what other stories just like Raymond Woltkamp's, might still be out there, waiting in forgotten files and local archives, just waiting for someone to piece them back together and bring that history, that human story, back to light.